Draft week is finally here as we are just a few days away from the Indianapolis Colts going on the clock. So which defensive players could the Colts be targeting on day 2 and 3 of the draft to help out Gus Bradley's unit? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Fan Nation on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and he's back, ladies and gentlemen. The man himself, my co-host Drake Wally, back in the building. Good to have you back, brother. But shout out to Noah. Noah did a fantastic job filling in for Drake last Thursday. Noah will definitely be back on the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast here at some point. But Drake, good to have you back, and you're back just in time. It's draft week. We're going to talk about day 2 and day 3 defensive players that the Indianapolis Colts could have on their radar. And honestly, there's a good chance a lot of these guys could be Colts when the weekend is all said and done. But how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. And yeah, shout out to Noah. Absolutely fantastic job. And one hell of an addition to the team. But yeah, man, I mean, we always feel like we've done enough research on these prospects that we're, enough in the brain of Chris Ballard that we've got these nailed down. And, days 2 and 3, man, that's really where you start to see some of the scouting really pay off. Not saying it doesn't in the first or second round, the first round, but it just seems like you have to dig a little deeper to find out some of these other prospects later in the rounds because there's just not as much on them. They don't have as much attention on them like a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr., where a lot of the tape is just out there. So I'm intrigued to talk about it. We're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball. It's a huge thing for the Colts this season. They have multiple spots just on the defense alone that they need to get some talent.
Exactly, because, cornerback could still use some help. Safety could still use help. The Colts are always looking to add more pass rushers. A coverage linebacker is still a need for this team. So there's a lot of holes that the Colts need to be able to fill and need to address. And a lot of it can happen on day 2 and 3 because like we have been really talking about, I mean, the Colts could go cornerback in round 1, but a lot of what we're seeing, it's pointing to a wide receiver or a pass catcher in round 1. So either way, day 2 and day 3 picks on the defensive side of the ball going to be very, very important. Stormy getting us off to a fantastic start with the $10 super sticker. Really, really appreciate it.
Woo-hoo!
Appreciate all of your support as always. Getting Drake to start out with the night with a nice, cool beverage here. Thank you so much for all of your support. Truett is in the building. Sounds like we could do some nice things on day 2 and 3. The Colts definitely can do that as well. NFL Nerd saying that Stormy's starting us off right as well. Sarah is in the building tonight. Hey, Andrew and Drake and everyone, I'm ready for the draft Thursday. Go Colts. Yes, same here. We are definitely ready to get this thing kicked off. DSG Goodbar is here for draft week. Patrick also filling in for Drake, had enough time to pound shots and stop by anyway. Yeah, Drake was celebrating at a wedding and still could make it to the show. So shout out to Drake. Shout out, you did the Lord's work there by still showing up and giving a super chat at that. And then the third host of the show, Stats Matt, what's up? Be ready for stat craziness. Also thankful to be a part of this trio that's voted best in Colts podcasting. Yeah, we had a loyal fan post on Twitter today talking about that Drake, myself, and Stats Matt were the best trio in Colts podcasting. So it's always good to give Stats Matt his flowers. So like I said, tonight, day 2 and day 3 picks or targets for the Indianapolis Colts on the defensive side of the football. We're going to go through all the top positions: cornerback, safety, edge, linebacker are going to be discussed tonight. And then we're going to dive into Chris Ballard's comments, some comments from the presser that might have stood out to you. So, but before we do that, go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night. And for special episodes like tomorrow night, we'll be back here live tomorrow night, and Drake and I will be doing our final Colts mock draft for you. All 7 rounds, trades included. We're going to do that tomorrow night live on the YouTube channel. You're not going to want to miss it. You're also not going to want to miss our live stream of the entire first round of the NFL draft. We're going to be here relaxing, watching all the picks, giving live analysis, and of course, seeing who the Colts end up taking at number 15 or wherever they end up selecting in the first round of the draft. So make sure you have your notifications on. But if you can't catch us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So make sure you subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. So Drake, defensive targets on day 2 and 3 of the NFL draft. And Chris Ballard even talked about it, that he expects there to be a lot of offensive players taken in the first round of the draft, particularly up high in the first round. So really in the second, third round, and even into day 3, there's going to be some good talent available on the defensive side of the ball that the Colts could potentially add to their roster.
Yeah, and you're also looking at a lot of, I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but a lot of offensive talent is going to be loaded, especially in the first round. So there will be some defensive players taken, but when you're talking about just those day 2 picks, I really think the Colts could do some damage. I think that you're probably going to see some kind of trade back at some point, just so you can get more of those day 2, day 3 picks. And I also think that there's a deep enough, everyone's been talking about wide receiver class this year. It's fantastic, but there are really good cornerbacks that are in the day 2, especially the day 2 range, that I think could really help Indianapolis out. And who knows, maybe they'll double dip or triple dip like they did last season. I know they didn't hold on to Darius Rush, but they intended to. I mean, if it would have worked out with Rush, they probably would have kept him and Jalen Jones. Who knows?
Yeah, really, you don't know what the board is going to look like until the actual event, which makes the NFL draft so exciting. So, Drake, let's start out with the cornerback position tonight, because I think, we've talked about that position already quite a bit in our draft previews. We did deep dives into Quinyon Mitchell, Terry and Arnold, Cooper DeJean, all guys that we think would be deserving of that first round pick status with the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, Mitchell at 15, you're probably running in the card if he's available. Arnold, definitely a solid option there. And then DeJean, you think after a little bit of a trade back, but say the Colts don't go cornerback in round 1. Say they go Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy. Really, they're going to go Brock Bowers, but I digress. The train's not stopping, guys, until Brock Bowers is no longer available. I'm going to tell you that right now. But Drake, what do the Colts typically look for in their cornerbacks? I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but specifically when you're thinking about these day 2 picks, they're not perfect prospects by any means, but what are some of the baselines that you've seen with the Colts drafted ever since Chris Ballard became the general manager, but specifically with Gus Bradley as the defensive coordinator? What type of cornerbacks do they typically look for?
Well, I mean, lengthy. You want lengthy. Now, you think about Juju Brents. That's like, physically, that is exactly what Gus Bradley wants, is a guy like that. Kind of similar to almost like Cam Chancellor, Byron Maxwell back in the day of the Legion of Boom, Richard Sherman, just those long guys, but not limited to just 6'4", freakishly long guys. Guys like Kenny Moore, who might be shorter, but they have the wingspan and the arms to make up for a lot of that. So you have to have some kind of trait usually. And I think that ever since the Josh Downs pick last season, I do think that Chris Ballard is changing his philosophy a little bit on what he's looking for. But I do still think that as far as Gus Bradley goes, man, you got to have some sort of trait that really sticks out. Even if you're a shorter guy, maybe not long arms, but you're insanely quick and you can stick to a receiver, that's also going to qualify in some way, shape, or form, because they need help defensively. So stuff like that. I would say at the end of the day, high athletic traits, and if possible, long or really fast at cornerback.
Yeah, I would agree there. Patrick saying, what is Andrew going to do if the Colts pass on Bowers? Let's not even talk about it, okay? Because I mean, there's a certain infamous Indy Star columnist that says column coming all the time. There's going to be a column coming if the Colts do not take Brock Bowers and he's available there at 15. I'll tell you that right now, Patrick. But yeah, Drake. So I mean, obviously, when you look at who the Colts typically look for. The measurements at the cornerback position, usually over 6 foot, over 200 pounds. I think Rock Yasin measured in at 5'11. So they typically go under 6 foot, or they can go under 6 foot sometimes, but it's not going to be by a lot. So I would say 5'11 is the minimum that a cornerback would have to reach, especially if the Colts are taking them on day 2, first round, day 2, somewhere in that area. But usually long arms, you mentioned it, usually over 32-inch arms, explosive. I think I got this from Zach Hicks, Build a Ballard special on cornerbacks. The cornerbacks taken are usually in the 80th percentile in the vertical. The Colts love those explosive athletes. So you're going to typically see guys that really test well in the vertical jump, in the broad jump. Those guys really going to be on the Colts radar. And then again, when you're talking about coverage, it's off coverage skills. Most of the time the Colts are in off coverage. They like to add some press techniques here and there, which is why another reason why they like to get big physical cornerbacks in there, but mostly it's off coverage. And then in run support, Drake, you know that the Colts always require their cornerbacks to tackle. Think of Juju Brents. You think of Kenny Moore, even Jalen Jones, getting in the mix, not being afraid to really come and crash down on the run game. You have to be involved in that. So those are I think the really the big traits that stand out. And when you think of some day 2 cornerbacks that stick out for me, one of the guys that I've been really, really high on this entire draft cycle is Cam Hart. And here's our first stat of the day. Cam Hart, 0.95, so less than 1 yard allowed per man snap, 0.67 yards per zone snap. So again, this guy both times under a yard allowed on a coverage snap, but obviously he's better in zone than he is in man, almost by a third. 1 reception every 19 coverage snaps, 15 catches, 137 yards, 0 touchdowns allowed in 2023, 308 coverage snaps for a 67.1 passer rating against. Cam Hart, Drake, we saw him live at the Notre Dame Pro Day. He looks kind of like in the same mold of Juju Brents, a bigger cornerback, but he's athletic, he's fluid. A lot of times with those big guys, it can be tough for them to whip around, get to it and change direction. I didn't see any of those issues with Cam Hart. He was really fluid in his drills. His hips moved very well. So Cam Hart, an very easy target on day 2 at the cornerback position, in my opinion. And then Max Melton. Max Melton from Rutgers, a guy that is a little bit smaller, only about 5'11", but he's a hell of an athlete. 9.09 RAS for Max Melton. Comes in with the second stat of the day. Max Melton, 252 yards, 72 yards after catch allowed in 339 coverage snaps. 24 catches on 44 targets, 3 touchdowns allowed, 3 interceptions, 3 pass breakups, and a passer rating of 65.7. Very good numbers, and Melton's that guy with that speed, Drake. I think he has 4.3 speed, if I remember correctly. When talking about Max Melton, he's a guy that's not the tallest guy, but he's fast. 4.39 speed at the combine, has over 32-inch arms, fantastic athlete. Both of those guys, I think, would be fantastic fits with the Indianapolis Colts on day 2. But what do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I think that Cam Hart, kind of like we talked about and at the Notre Dame Pro Day, and like we saw, and like you just mentioned, he's got the length, he's got the athleticism, he checks all the boxes. He's very similar in build to Juju Brents, and he's got really good numbers. He's really efficient. There's obviously areas that he can work on, especially when it comes to just kind of like with Juju Brents, those shorter route running, twitchy type of receivers like Josh Downs. That's typically going to be the kryptonite, or somebody, as we saw with Juju Brents and Nico Collins, in a one-on-one matchup that can hit a post like Collins. That's going to be a disadvantage. You're not getting that with a guy, with Cam Hart. He's a fantastic zone type of guy, press type of guy like Juju Brents, but you're not going to have the the speed, but you're not missing that with a guy like Max Melton. I
Mhm.
absolutely love that pick. I think that's a hell of a player that's getting kind of buried in the amongst the other cornerbacks. Doesn't really get talked about a lot. I think the Colts definitely have their eye on him. I think that they need a fast cornerback. You've got a lot of athletes, and you've got a guy like Brents who isn't the fastest guy in his own right. Neither is Jalen Jones. You need a fast cornerback. But another couple guys, Kyrie Jackson from Oregon, fantastic fit right there. TJ Tampa from Iowa State, another good fit. Both of those guys are freakish athletes. Okay. Well, Kyrie Jackson is. CJ Tampa's a little bit on the lesser end, but still could be a good fit. So those are just
Mhm.
a couple guys. Andrew Phillips is another one that I've got here that you could keep your eye out for, because definitely have been on Ballard's eye for sure.
Yeah, I think so, and those again, those bigger cornerbacks, those high-end athletes, those are gonna be the guys that the Colts typically go after. And I do like Max Melton's fit with the Colts, specifically with Juju Brents on the other side, because we know Brents is a bigger cornerback, really physical. He doesn't have that burning speed. He's not a guy that runs a 4.3. Okay, Juju Brents has plenty of speed. Don't get me wrong. He's not out there running like a 4.8 40 at the cornerback position, but he's around a 4.5 guy. So that's adequate speed for the cornerback. You don't have those guys that can really stick with those burners at wide receiver. Max Melton with that 4.3 speed could do that. That was one of the big things with Quinyon Mitchell having that 4.3 speed as well. So yeah, and I have Kyrie Jackson on here as well. Drake, another one on day 3 that I think could be a really good fit, and this is a guy that's also had a couple of visits with the Colts too, is Jerry Jones from Florida State.
Another good one.
Jerry Jones, fantastic athlete, 961 RAS. This is a guy that, again, I think you can look for later on day 3. A little bit smaller, again, just below 5'11, almost 6 foot on the dot. 190 pounds, has shorter arms though, only 30-inch arms, but he's got that speed. 4.38 speed. So he's got really good speed, shorter arms. If the Colts can live with that, take him as a developmental cornerback. He gets some time on special teams, that kind of speed. You can probably earn yourself some reps at gunner, potentially as a kick returner. So that's another guy that I would keep my eye on, because while he might not hit the measurements that the Colts have met with him a few times. So definitely a name to keep an eye on as we get to day 3. But I think we're both in agreement here, Drake, that cornerback has to be addressed. Not necessarily in the first round. You don't want to reach for a cornerback in the first round, but you've got to add competition there. You got to add competition to push Juju Brents, to push Jalen Jones, to add some depth there. Dallas Flowers is going to come back from injury, and hopefully return to how he was playing. Push those guys and add some competition, but it's got to be more. Then you have to have more cornerbacks than just Kenny Moore the second, Brents, Jones, Dallas Flowers.
Yeah, and when you look at those skill sets, though, for each one of those guys you just named, you've got everything there. You've got Moore, who's probably the most well-rounded. He plays great in the slot, fantastic in the slot. Juju Brents has got a high upside, incredibly athletic, and Dallas Flowers, in his short sample, really similar to Anthony Richardson, showed a lot. He showed some really good stuff. So I think that if all those 3 guys are on the trajectory that we think they are, I mean, hey, they definitely need to get, I think, 2 cornerbacks, but I don't think you're going to see it go past the second round before they get a cornerback. They need to get one of those top guys, at least one, and then maybe get somebody else in the later rounds.
I'd be shocked if the Colts didn't select a cornerback on by the time day 2 ends. I think there will be at least one new cornerback on the Colts roster. But let's move to the next secondary position, really, Drake, and that's safety. You bring back Julian Blackmon if you're the Colts. That's great. You've got your strong safety locked up at least through 2024. But that free safety position, you still don't have any concrete answer for it, I should say. As of right now, it's probably going to be a battle between Nick Cross and Rodney Thomas, the second for that starting role. You've put a lot of draft capital into Nick Cross. You traded up for him, but he just hasn't shown it yet. He hasn't shown that he is deserving of being the set in stone starter at free safety. There are still some free safeties out there in free agency. Justin Simmons, Quandre Diggs. There's plenty of guys out there, and the Colts now have plenty of cap space with how they restructured DeForest Buckner's deal to go out and get those guys. But if they don't, they need to address it in the draft. You have to at least add more competition with Cross, with Thomas, because that's probably at this point your weakest position, I would say, is free safety.
Yeah, and look, you really saw it a lot when Blackman wasn't in the game, and when Cross had to go to the strong side, and then here's Rodney Thomas, doing free safety, and then all of a sudden he gets benched. So then you have to. It was just an absolute mess near the end of the season. So you really need to address this, kind of similar to corner, maybe not as urgent, right? I think it goes wide receiver, cornerback, safety, but they're really close as far as importance level. And I think that, day two, especially, you could potentially get yourself, along with a great cornerback, you could still get yourself one hell of a safety too. There's a lot of them.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's not a very top heavy safety class in my opinion. You probably won't see any safeties taken in the first round. The second round you could definitely see some safeties, at least a couple, and then I think third, fourth round, that's when the safeties are going to start coming off the board there. So, typically for safeties, again, long arms. I feel like we've been over this time and time again. The Colts love their players with long arms. Typically their safeties do have long arms. Also some decent speed. Safety isn't a position where you need to necessarily have a burner, but the Colts safeties usually run under a 4.6 40, so that way they can cover the deep halves of the field. They can play down in the box, and you can send them on blitzes. A lot of times Julian Blackman came down in the box because the Colts are one of the only teams that play a lot of cover three with a single high safety. So that's something to really pay attention to. And again, more explosive jumping scores. That explosiveness in the vertical, in the broad jump. The Colts really place a high emphasis on that to how they correlate explosiveness with the player. So all of that, really, if you can find that in the free safety mode, because I think the Colts are happy, at least for what they have starting out at strong safety, because Nick Cross can also play strong safety. He could be the backup to Julian Blackman. You have Trevor Dembo on the roster currently. Daniel Scott, I think Daniel Scott is more of a free safety, but you can also play him at strong safety. He can go back and forth. We're still waiting to see what he brings. But to me, I think if they're going to draft a safety early, it's got to be in that free safety spot. And one of my biggest draft crushes is would fit that perfectly at free safety. But Drake, what do you think? What do you think that the Colts would be looking for in terms of safety for strengths? Or do you think it doesn't really matter? It just has to be a safety. It doesn't necessarily need to be a strong safety or a free safety mold.
Well, I mean, I think that you're looking for probably a guy that's versatile. It's nice that it's nice if you can have a guy that can really bounce between both. But I do think that you want a guy who's heady, very, very smart, very good at play recognition, good at calling out movement. I mean, that was probably the biggest issue. We really, at least I know I'll do it and I'll admit it. I rail Rodney Thomas all the time, for mistakes he made in the 2023 season. But it really ultimately came down to bad communication. And so you need a guy who's got good football IQ, who's smart. But yeah, man, it's a free safety. It's more of the coverage safety. You need to be faster than a strong safety. And I do think while Nick Cross can play free safety, and in a perfect world, he plays that, Blackman plays the strong safety, continues to ascend his production. I do think Cross plays the strong safety better. Just his style fits it. So yeah, I think you need to push him because that's really his spot. He's not going to take that from Julian Blackman.
Now, before we get into our safety picks here, Drake, DSG Goodbar coming in with the super chat has a really good question. Thank you so much, DSG Goodbar, for the $2 super chat. Really, really appreciate it. As Drake takes a drink, Goodbar asked, do you think the new kick rules affect Ballard's picks? Absolutely, they do. Chris Ballard has even said it throughout this offseason that the new kick return rules, the new kickoff rules, are definitely impacting players when how they put them on the board, because kickoffs are now more important. They now hold a place in the game again. So that's something that as a player coming into the league, and if you're fighting for a roster spot, if you can be really good, not only as a kick returner, but on those kick coverage, that's going to earn you a roster spot, and especially guys that are on the fringe of the roster. So being able to do that, maybe especially if you're talking about a guy like a Xavier Worthy, for example. Xavier Worthy has experience as a returner. Does that boost him up the Colts board over a wide receiver that has a similar grade but doesn't have any return experience, or you can't use him as a returner? Absolutely it does. So yeah, the Colts are definitely taking these new kickoff rules into account when they're evaluating these prospects this year.
Yeah, you can't pass that up. I mean, if you've got a guy, especially if you do like multiple trade backs or a single trade back, or you just think a guy can play on the offense or the defense and return kicks, it's totally different now because everybody's more bunched up, and those rules will become way more of a habit for all of us because that's a pretty big change actually to have everyone just right in front of each other, almost Civil War style. But yes, you need guys now more than ever who can return those kicks, because you'll get a guy who can just shovel it out and he's faster and people are already behind him because everyone's wedged together. So you're going to see, I think, more kick return touchdowns than you've ever seen.
Thank you, DSG Goodbar, for the super chat and for the great question. Really, really do appreciate it and appreciate all of your support. So Drake, getting back to safeties here, I talked about my draft crush. It's Jaden Hicks. Jaden Hicks, I think, is the best safety in this class. The redshirt sophomore out of Washington State, 8.97 RAS. To me, he fits exactly what the Colts want at the safety position. He's a good athlete. He has the ability to cover deep, cover the various halves of the field. But he also has the ability to come down and play in man. He can line up as a man defender over tight ends, over running backs. And I think, around that 46 to 50 range could be the sweet spot for Jaden Hicks. The Colts have met with Jaden Hicks and have shown considerable interest in Hicks. Really, out of the top safety prospects, he's really the only one that they met with so far. So that's just keep that in mind. And Stats Matt saying, whoa, you're a draft crush, because it's been Stats Matt's draft crush as well. And let's get to the Stats Matt stat of the day on Jaden Hicks. 79 tackles, 2.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, 1 forced fumble, and 20 catches allowed on 31 targets for 170 yards, only 2 touchdowns allowed, with a passer rating of 73.3. Not bad for the safety position. But Drake, in my opinion, if the Colts are going to take a safety early, it's going to be Jaden Hicks. There's really good fit within Bradley's scheme. And honestly, I think Hicks challenges Nick Cross for that starting job at free safety from day one.
Yeah. I absolutely love this is just a little bit of a sneak peek, but the Indy draft comparison is Talanoa Hufanga from the 49ers, who, by the way, people, only played 10 games last season, still had 3 interceptions, and he has already notched an All-Pro and Pro Bowl. Okay, so that's a name that when you see it, you're like, who the heck is that? Go look this guy up. Electric. So I think, good God, if they could get a guy like Jaden Hicks, you're talking about the complete package. And I mean, he would really be on the heels of Nick Cross. I think when you see a safety prospect like Jaden Hicks, they really hit more often than they don't. They just do. And I think that he's without question the best one. Another guy that I do like is Cole Bishop, from Utah. I think he exhibits a lot of the same things. I just think that really, as long as the Colts can get a safety that can just cover, even if that's all they can do, that's a step up. Cover and communicate. Those are the 2 things that are probably more important than anything. And tackling. You can't miss tackles, because generally you're the last line of defense. So I just think that, guys, if you can get Jaden Hicks, you can get Cole Bishop, guys like that. Oh man, I think that's a pretty big win. And I think that they're going to push Nick Cross, which you want. You want to push a guy that you traded up to get that has not hit his ceiling yet.
Yeah. And I think Cole Bishop, again, it fits more of the strong safety mold, but again,
That's fair.
For the Colts, do you really necessarily want to be picky? Because I could see the Colts also taking Cole Bishop, Drake, because again, Julian Blackmon only on a 1-year deal. So if Cole Bishop comes in, you see the promise in that. Could Cole Bishop be could be your strong safety of the future? Wouldn't rule that out in the slightest. Some other day 2 safeties that have really caught my eye: Malik Mustafa from Wake Forest, 9.39 RAS. He's doesn't have necessarily isn't the ball hawk that I would say like in the category of Jaden Hicks, but he's a really good competitor. He's fast, has really good range, plays well against the run, plays well against the pass and man coverage, can also cover the deep half of the field. Kind of reminds me of Jordan Whitehead a little bit. And he can also contribute on special teams. So Mustafa in the 3rd round, definitely an option for the Indianapolis Colts. Another one, Dadarian Taylor Demerson. And this comes from StatsMat. 53 solo tackles, 5 interceptions, 4 PBUs, 20 catches on 35 targets for 221 yards, 3 touchdowns allowed, and a passer rating of 65. So Taylor Demerson is another one there that I think 3rd round, potentially 4th round, potentially on day 3. But he's got a little bit smaller arms. You know, he's only about got 30 and a half inch arms, smaller wingspan there, which could potentially mean he might slide into the nickel, but great instincts as a safety, can really impressive in coverage. It does still need to develop a little bit. Would have to start probably on special teams, so we wouldn't have necessarily the big impact right away. But he's got all the tools to be a really solid safety in this league. So Drake, who are some other safeties that have stood out to you throughout the process?
You know, so this is going to kind of go in reverse. I think that more day 3 would be Sion Vaki, I believe,
Yes.
who is actually he's actually the teammate. Now I'm having a brain fart. We just talked about him. Other safety at Utah. Goodness.
Oh, Cole Bishop.
Yeah, so he's a teammate of Cole Bishop going right into the draft too. He's, I think, definitely more of a day 3 fit, and I think at that point the Colts will have probably also picked a safety. If they pick Vaki, they're double dipping a safety. They really want competition there, which I think they're only going to pick one, but that could potentially be a guy that might hit day 3. But man, this is mine. This is my guy that I want them to pick, and that's Tyke Smith from Georgia. Oh, man, this guy played with a chip on his shoulder in college, and he just was fantastic. Real high football IQ, high fit for the Colts, high-level fit. He fits everything they're trying to do. He can play both positions. I think he's also played cornerback. I mean, he's versatile as hell, and he sticks his nose into the run defense too. I think that would be a home run hit if they can't get Cole Bishop, you know, and they can't get one of the top prospects, a guy like Jaden Hicks. I think Tyke Smith would be an awesome addition, but look for him around 4, 5, maybe 3 at the earliest.
You've definitely been on Smith from the very beginning, so he's
awesome.
He's definitely been one of your guys from the very jump. I want to give a couple shout outs here, going to Mike with the $2 super chat. Thank you so much, Mike, for all of your support. Says appreciate you guys been listening in for a bit. Hey, glad to hear it, but glad you're enjoying the show. And again, Drake and I appreciate all of the support. And then a shout out to Yim as well. Thanks as always. Looking forward to Thursday with you. Yeah, exactly. And Yim, don't miss us tomorrow night. We'll be back here tomorrow night, Yim, with our final mock draft. We'll run through that for you guys, and then the live stream, the marathon live stream, where we're going to be live for the entire first round of the NFL draft on Thursday night. Going to be a lot of fun. But Yim, appreciate all of your support. Drake, just to kind of put a bow on the safety conversation, my last safety to keep an eye on, Mark Perry out of TCU, 9.60 RAS, a guy that the Colts have shown a lot of interest in. This is a guy that probably you're looking at later on day 3. Good special teams player, but the Colts have definitely had a lot of communication with Perry throughout the process. So keep that name in mind as we get towards the end of day 3. Let's switch gears to the defensive line. You know, defensive tackle, I think on the interior, pretty well set. with Buckner, Stewart, Raekwon Davis. You have Adetomo Adebawore in there. You re-sign Taven Bryan. You've got a lot of bodies there. But on edge, the Colts are always looking to add pass rushers, and they were aggressive to go after Daniil Hunter. Kwity Paye potentially entering a contract year if the Colts don't pick up his 5th-year option. Dayo Dangbo entering a contract year. So there's a lot of moving parts to the edge department, and I think that edge could come earlier than a lot of people think, especially on day 2. I think day 2 is really the sweet spot for the Colts to take an edge rusher.
Yeah, and look, we can, like Andrew said, rule out defensive interior, and I've seen mock drafts. I've covered a couple of them where it's just like, no, they're not going interior early in the draft. Probably not at all at this point, especially since they weirdly kept Taven Bryan, and they signed Raekwon Davis, and they retained Grover Stewart, and they just extended DeForest Buckner. So no, they're good on the inside, but I will say, and Adetomo Adebawore, but I will say that on the outside, you really can never have enough, because you want, when you get a guy like Ebukam out of there, that's why a guy like Lewis is so valuable. Tyquan Lewis, he comes in there and he replaces Ebukam with relentless pass rush. So it's like depth is so important, and you really can never have enough of those guys, because if any one of those guys goes down, you really want to try your best to miss as few beats as possible, especially if it's like middle or late in the season.
Exactly. So when you look at the edge rushers that the Colts typically like to go after, the first thing, again, sounding like a broken record, long arms. You think of Kwity Paye, Dayo Dangbo, Samson Ebukam, all those guys, really long arms. The Colts love pass rushers with long arms to keep offensive tackles from getting their hands on them. Another thing, explosive off the line of scrimmage. You see them explode with their the vertical jump, the broad jump, those testing numbers. Really, really fast, explosive defensive linemen have good speed as well. And then the thing that I also want to talk about here is kind of the Leo position, which Samson Ebukam plays, versus the big end position, which is kind of where Kwity Paye and Dayo Dangbo kind of line up. So the Leo is typically those undersized pass rushers that get out in that wide 9 stance, pin their ears back, go get the quarterback. That's really their only job in Gus Bradley's scheme. The big end, those are the guys that like to, or I shouldn't say like to, but those are the guys that are tasked with being your better run defending defensive ends. The Kwity Payes, Dayo Dangbos, where they still need to get after the quarterback, but those are the guys that they're not strictly those pass rushers. They also have to play the run. So when you're thinking of different pass rushers and what their strengths are, those are kind of the different positions that you would want to place them in when you're thinking, where does this guy fit along the Colts offensive line? So Drake, all that being said, who are some of the pass rushers in this draft class on day 2 and day 3 that you think really, really fit what the Colts are looking for, whether it's at Leo, whether it's at big end? Which guys have really caught your eye and thinking, wow, they would fit perfect in Gus Bradley's scheme and with new defensive line coach Charlie Partridge?
Yeah, and before that, if anyone hears my daughter in the background, she is really pissed at something, so she's crying a lot. So shout out to my fiance Aubrey. She is truly a warrior of a mother. So, man, the third round really has prospects that I think I really, like Andrew said, everyone's, no one's talking about edge. Don't be surprised if in round 3 they take somebody. I think that a guy like Chris Braswell could potentially meet their requirements. I think a guy that's recently come up big, who's met with like over half the league's teams, is I believe it's Western Michigan's Marshawn Nealand.
Mm-hmm.
A guy who really does it all really well. He's not like a high level pass rusher, but he's not a guy that is going to have, he's going to have a nice solid floor at the worst type of prospect. And I think that those are really a couple guys. I think another guy is Miles Cole from Texas Tech. That's a guy who's, more late. I think more of a 6th, 7th round pick. But I think that those are some guys. And like you said, they're all fitting the typical way that the Colts draft defensive ends that's really long, or they're athletic, or they're fast. It really depends on what they want to address. Do they want to address that strong side or weak side? Do they want fast or strong? And so we'll have to see how they go about it, but I don't think that they're going to pass up on an edge rusher. I think you're going to see him take one.
Yeah, you mentioned Nealon, and he really
yeah.
fits that kind of that big end role for the Colts, because I think for Nealon, he stands at 6'3", 267 pounds. That's about the kind of the size of Kwity Paye, so that really fits that big end. Stats Matt with another one. With Marshawn Nealon out of Western Michigan, 57 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 2 forced fumbles there. But Drake, the guy the pass rusher that I think is my favorite on day 2 for the Colts, put him in my mock draft. That's Adisa Isaac out of Penn State. This guy is an animal.
Yeah.
I think his RAS was around 8.99, so almost a 9 on the RAS. But this guy, you look at the measurements, and he just fits what the Colts like as a pass rusher. 6'4", 247 pounds at the combine. His pro day was 253 pounds, almost 34-inch arms, 81-inch wingspan. This guy is athletic. He might be a little undersized in terms of weight, but you put him out there at that Leo spot in that wide 9 technique, you allow his athleticism to take over. He uses those long arms to keep offensive tackles off of him. He uses his speed, a 4.7, 440, but that 10-yard split, 1.63 on the 10-yard split. Adisa Isaac just really, really fits as a Leo. He definitely needs some work. He's a little bit raw, a little bit rough around the edges. He's got the length, the energy, he's got all the athletic tools to be a really impactful pass rusher. It's just going to take the right defensive line coach and the right defensive coordinator to unlock his potentially like a Charlie Partridge. So I think you could start Isaac as that backup Leo to Samson Ebukam. And as he works on his game, he gets more and more snaps. When Ebukam's contract is time to run out here, I think after in 2 seasons, Isaac may be ready to take over that role as a starting Leo, and he may have finally fully grown into his own as a pass rusher, and I think he has the potential to get double-digit sacks per season. But I'm really big on Adisa Isaac. I think all the physical tools are there. Just going to take the right coaching to really mold him into it and allow him to reach his ceiling as such an athletic freak that he is. So Isaac is big. We talked about Nealon already on day 3. Here's the Jalix Hunt out of Houston Christian. Here's a guy that I had all 3 of my mock drafts.
I know you're all about Jalix Hunt.
All about Jalix Hunt's former safety at Cornell, transfers to Houston Christian, and becomes an absolute animal at the defensive end position. Stats Matt has it right here: 46 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 1 interception, 2 forced fumbles, 1 block kick, 80 career pressures. If there was a stat to have, Jalix Hunt was all over it. So really, really fun prospect. Small school guy, switch positions. Those are some of the things that Ballard has shown he's liked, and the Colts have taken chances on those guys. So Hunt on day 3, I think, would be a really good fit. And then Miles Cole was my other one. You already touched on it. Miles Cole, I think, again, guy that really fits what the Colts like at the edge rusher position. Shout out to the CFO Patrick himself with the $5 super chat. He's got some more guys for us at the edge rusher. Cedric Johnson, Marshawn Nealon, like we talked about, Javante Jean-Baptiste,
Notre Dame. We saw him.
Notre Dame. We talked to him at the pro day. Miles Cole as well. Post second round guys from the Senior Bowl with a 9.0 plus RAS score, right up the Colts alley. So some really good names from Patrick there. Thank you so much for all of your support as always. And then I want to include Braden Trice in here, because Stats Matt coming in here with this one, which is really, really good. 49 tackles, 7 sacks, 11 tackles for loss for Braden Trice. 70 pressures in 2023 and 2022 each. 140 pressures over the past 2 seasons. That's huge. That is huge. You talk about wanting consistent pressure on the quarterback. Braden Trice out of Washington, definitely a guy that can provide that. And that's certainly not going to go unnoticed by a team like the Indianapolis Colts, or Braylon Trice, out of Washington. But yeah, another guy that I think could be on the Colts radar there on day two, Drake, as far as pass rushers are concerned. There's a lot of decent ones out there, especially in that round 2 to 3 to 4 range that I think the Colts are going to have their eye on.
Yeah, look, let's be honest. Right now, the Colts don't have a generational pass rusher. Okay, at least not that we know of. So you need pressure on the quarterback. When you have a collective unit like the Colts have, you need consistent pressure. So why not go out there and get some guys in the draft, especially when you don't need a high level talent or an early pick at defensive end, like especially in round 1? Why not get guys who put pressure on the quarterbacks? Again, I keep going back to it because he's one of my favorites. That's why Tyquan Lewis is so damn valuable. So expect a defensive end to absolutely at some point get picked for the Colts, because like so many of these other positions outside of wide receiver, there's some diamonds in the rough, man.
You can never have enough pass rushers. That's
right.
for sure. So for the last position we're going to talk about on defense tonight, linebacker. The Colts are pretty set as their starters with Zaire Franklin and EJ Speed, at least for this season. You know, EJ Speed's contract is set to run out at the end of the 2024 season, so the Colts could be looking potentially for his replacement, or EJ Speed could very well sign an extension as well. Colts really like EJ Speed, but we've talked about this at times throughout the offseason, Drake. You still need your coverage linebacker. The Colts really don't have a linebacker that excels in coverage. The best they had was Bobby Okereke. Okereke is now with the New York Giants, tearing it up over there. EJ Speed has shown at times he can do that. If he develops into a coverage linebacker on a more consistent basis, then I think you're okay. Zaire Franklin, not his strong suit. He's more of the see ball, get ball kind of run defense linebacker in the middle there, but a coverage linebacker, really, especially on those third downs. That's who the Colts could desperately use. And there are some options here, I think, in this linebacker class, especially throughout day 2 and 3.
Yeah, and you just nailed it, man. I mean, and we forget about Saguna Luby. You know, he showed some prowess and ability. You know, especially in the Carolina game. I think he actually started and played the entire game. So, you know, they've got a guy like him. Grant Stewart is always hungry, right? But they need a designated coverage linebacker. They're not going to go out there and probably get a guy that is the top linebacker. Now, if he's sitting there available and they feel comfortable, maybe they do. But me and Andrew are absolutely thinking, and especially in my upcoming mock draft, they're definitely going with the coverage style.
Yeah, I agree. You know, that's something that they're just missing from the linebacker room, and you're looking for a guy that can also play special teams as well. The Colts have had a pretty high hit rate on linebackers under Chris Ballard. So when you look at what the Colts value in their linebackers, again, athletic with long arms. Over 33-inch arms is typically the norm for the Colts at the linebacker position. Coverage ability from sideline to sidelines is what they need. Guys that test really well in the explosive drills. Zaire Franklin certainly did that. EJ Speed certainly did that. Shaquille Leonard was probably going to before he pulled his hamstring running the 40, and then the ability to play special teams. You know, Zaire Franklin started on special teams, worked his way up. So did EJ Speed. The next Colts linebacker probably going to have to do the same. Start on special teams, work your way up into a bigger role on the defensive side of the football. So Drake, with all that in mind, who are some of the linebackers that have stood out to you throughout this process? Because there's really not many linebackers that you're going to look to go in the first round. I don't know if any linebacker is going to be picked in the first round this year. A couple in round 2 potentially, round 3, 4, and 5, and beyond. That's where you're going to see most of the linebackers go in the 2024 NFL draft.
Yeah, I think if they're going early, Peyton Wilson makes a lot of sense. I think he's probably, North Carolina State, probably one of the more complete linebackers. Cedric Gray, another one, really good coverage linebacker. Marist Liufau from Notre Dame, watched him actually at the pro day. Maybe not the most athletic, but he's a hell of a cover linebacker, and that's what the Colts are looking for. And I'm probably blanking on the others, actually, but at the end of the day, linebackers actually one of their stronger positions, because I do think Saguna Luby's a dog. I really do. But I think that you do need to bring in a designated cover linebacker. Again, these are millionaires playing this game of football. You got to push them. You got to keep them on their toes. Okay. So I think that a coverage linebacker would suit the Colts really well. I just don't think it's going to happen as soon as Peyton Wilson or Cedric Gray. I think you're talking day 3.
Yeah, that's where I think the sweet spot is. Just depending on how the board falls, you say you get one of the top guys, in the right spot.
That's
You
fair.
you never know what might happen because I mean, hey, Colts have done it before. They spent a high second round pick on Shaquille Leonard, and for a number of years, that turned out really well for him. So you mentioned Cedric Gray stats, Matt. His stats on Cedric Gray: 121 total tackles, 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and an interception. His career stats: 369 total tackles, 30 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks with 18 pass breakups and 5 interceptions. There's your coverage linebacker, Drake.
As a linebacker,
Cedric Gray is a really good coverage linebacker. Maybe not the best athlete. I think he only has like a 7.26 RAS out of University of North Carolina. So he's not a terrible athlete by any means, but he's just not the high end athlete that the Colts typically go for. But still, I think Cedric Gray, what he shows on the field, is worthy of a pick there. One of the big guys that I wanted to talk about was Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M.
another good one.
Edgerrin Cooper is, in my opinion, the best linebacker in this class. Hell of an athlete, 9.13 RAS. He really fits what the Colts are looking for at the linebacker position as well. Starting out, you look at his size. He's 6'2", 230 pounds, 34-inch arms, runs a 4.5 40, 80-inch wingspan. All over the place as a coverage linebacker. Stats, Matt has his stats here: 83 total tackles, 8 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 pass breakups, and the only linebacker in college with an 85 plus PFF rating in run defense, pass rush, and coverage. Edgerrin Cooper could be your new Shaquille Leonard, if the Colts take him high enough, but that's probably going to take number 46. I don't know if he'll even be there when the Colts pick in the second round, because there's plenty of other teams that could use a linebacker more than the Colts could be looking at taking the athletic freak that is Edgerrin Cooper there. But he's a fantastic linebacker. Wouldn't hate it if the Colts took him in the second round. I just think the Colts have more pressing needs than to take an off-ball linebacker that high at this time. But when you just turn on the tape and look at his game specifically, fantastic. And then when you look at some options on day 3, and as Patrick is going to say, put some respect on his name, guys. I'll be honest with you. Before the show, Drake and I were looking and trying to say this dude's name, so I wasn't going to mess it up live on the show. We're going to try it here again, and I'm going to try my best. Edefuyan Yolofosio. And hopefully I said it kind of correctly. But it's funny because in the Beast, it's in quotations, instead of saying Udafonion, it's Jeffrey. But Yolofosio, Drake, a guy that really fits what the Indianapolis Colts want to do, could be that perfect coverage linebacker. I have him going to the Colts in my mock draft. Just a guy that is athletic. His RAS score was a 9.67. Again, fits what the Colts want. Long arms, athletic, explosive, can cover from sideline to sideline. He's the type of linebacker that you want, and he can start on special teams, work his way up, potentially be that replacement for EJ Speed. I think he has the potential to be a solid to good starter, to very good starter in the NFL, with development, with time, and it could be the next really good linebacker for the Indianapolis Colts. So Yolofosio, I'm a huge fan of his in this draft, and if the Colts could get him in the 5th round, I think it would be a home run pick.
Yeah, and look, I'm all on Yolofosio because I think that he had a 90.4 cover grade per Pro Football Focus.
Hard to beat that. Really hard to beat that.
And okay, linebacker, you're like, well, how many snaps?
He had an absolute crap ton in the slot. I mean, this dude covered a lot of slot tight ends, slot receivers. If they threw a running back out there and he was right in the box, that was the dude that they had go over and cover that guy in motion. I mean, this guy's a coverage specialist, and I think that's my pick, man. At least at linebacker, I think that Ulafogio would be an absolute just home run hit if you can grab him in the 5th round, because there's a really good chance he goes before that, just given what he can do in today's passing league.
Exactly. It's really hard to find a better fit at the linebacker position than Ulafogio there, especially early on day 3. So we threw a lot of players at you guys tonight. So if you haven't heard about any of those players or want to learn more about those players, guys, go order the Indy draft guide, because we have prospect write-ups on all of these players, over 225 prospect write-ups on these players for the Indianapolis Colts. The Build a Ballard series is there as well. Make sure you go get yours today. The link is in the description below. But Drake, lot of good players here on day 2 of the NFL draft, day 2 and 3, that the Colts can add to their defense.
Yeah, and look, there's so many positions to address, and I think that you're going to see a trade back. You're going to see some cool things happen, but I really think that this one is so exciting because you don't know where the hell it's going to go. And that first pick in the first round, or whatever the Colts do in that first round, is going to dictate the rest of the draft, and I do think that they're going to end up with more than 7 picks, though, somehow, some way.
I think so. I would also put money that the Colts will have more than 7 picks by the end of the night. So let's talk about the latest Colts news and rumors as we wrap up the episode tonight, Drake. And really, the thing to talk about is Chris Ballard's pre-draft presser. And normally I say the Colts give a lot of Chris Ballard leaves some nuggets about what the team is thinking, and while he did leave a few nuggets, in my opinion, nothing earth-shattering. He made a comment about talking about comparing two different players, and how the Colts could potentially use those different players in various roles. To me, that sounded like they were talking about Brian Thomas Jr. and Xavier Worthy at the wide receiver position. Definitely think that. It does sound like Chris Ballard is confident with his cornerbacks. He thinks they've grown up. He thinks they're going to take a next step. So do I think that the need at cornerback is or do I think Chris Ballard thinks the need at cornerback is as pressing as others? I don't know about that. I'm not 100% certain that he really feels that way. Now, that doesn't mean that if Quinyon Mitchell is staring the Colts right in the face at number 15, the Colts aren't going to take him. I think the Colts would take Quinyon Mitchell. They'd probably run up the card to take Quinyon Mitchell if he's sitting there at 15. Will he be there at 15? That's another story completely. We'll have to see what happens on Thursday. But I don't think the Colts feel like they're in a spot where they have to force cornerback or they have to force wide receiver, if that makes sense. That's kind of the vibe that I got from Chris Ballard. And it sounds like he has a lot of confidence that Juju Brents is going to take the next step, that Jalen Jones and Dallas Flowers are going to make themselves better there, that Kenny Moore is still going to be the Kenny Moore of old in the slot. So again, it doesn't feel like there is a massive hole at the cornerback position currently.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest reasons, and it's probably the most unentertaining one, and a lot of Colts fans threw it out there that, well, what has Ballard done? The reason that the Colts don't feel rushed, especially at cornerback, is because they re-signed a bunch of their pillars. They re-signed a bunch of their key playmakers. You win by keeping your talent in-house as long as possible. So I think that, yes, of course you want a guy like Quinyon Mitchell, but I think that, outside of every position outside of corner, I agree with Ballard, because here's the thing. At cornerback, the depth, it's just really concerning still. I think Darrell Baker Jr., unless he can show us a spark in camp, like he fooled us last year, man. Remember, he was fantastic in camp and just could not figure it out once the season got going. So I think that cornerback is probably the biggest one that you should not feel comfortable about. But at the same time, maybe some of these developmental guys that are behind the starters that we haven't been talking about, they know more than us. Maybe they've been, ascending and getting better to the point where they feel comfortable with their depth.
And it could very well be that Jalen Jones takes the next step, Juju Brents takes the next step, and you're fine at cornerback. But you want to continue to add competition. So right. I don't think it really changes anything. Do I think the Colts are going to trade up? I really don't see the Colts trading up. Chris Ballard said that we're going to trade back anyway, so just get ready for it. His annual joke before the NFL draft. So I mean, we'll have to see. Again, Chris Ballard's not going to reveal a lot of stuff before the draft. He never does. You get more of those nuggets in the postseason presser or right after the season ends, because Ballard's emotions are typically a little bit higher at that point. So you're going to get some more raw emotion. He's going to let some things slip out. But really, from looking at it, that's the main things that I did take away from it. They are discussing Brian Thomas Jr. versus Xavier Worthy there in the first round, and that they don't feel pressured to have to take a cornerback early if the one that they don't like ends up falling to them. So we'll see. Then finally, Patrick kind of brought this up too. Only double dip we see, I think, is on the offensive line. Chris Ballard talked about protecting Anthony Richardson a lot, and he talked about how the offensive line group is a really good group in this class. And so I think double dipping at offensive line, definitely not out of the question. I think they definitely take at least one offensive lineman. And in my mock draft that I released today, I had them taking two. I think that's what happens. I do think a double dip at the offensive line to add depth, especially along the interior. I think that's bound to happen. So overall, not too much to glean from it, but I think at this point we're all just ready for the draft to be here. And guys, it's only 3 more days away. Drake, I can't wait to see what the Colts end up doing, not only on Thursday night, but Friday and Saturday as well.
Yeah, I'm so damn ready for the draft that I'm not going to be able to sleep, and I'm going to keep my daughter, who's 2 months old, awake. It's going to be the other way around. I'm going to be able to sleep so little. So, look, man, this is such an important draft for the Colts' future, and I think that they have a lot of positions, again, to address. But I think they have a game plan, and I think, like we said, that first round and whatever they do, there's like 5, 6, 7, 8 selections I think that we've talked about that they could get realistically, whether it's staying put, moving up at a certain point where it makes sense, or trading back. There's so many ways they could go. So just buckle in, join us for the rest of the coverage before the draft, and then absolutely do not miss when me and Andrew are here for round 1. It's going to be epic. It's going to be awesome.
Very well said. So that's our show for tonight, guys. Really appreciate everybody tuning in for our final draft preview episode. Want to give a shout out to all of our super chats: Stormy, DSG Goodbar, Mike Yim, and the menace himself, Patrick Rye. I've been seeing a couple of his comments in the chat. I mean, yes, you are an absolute menace. Always has been, always will be. Appreciate all of the support. Stats Matt, for all the stats that he provided. He's an absolute gem as well. Everyone gives Stats Matt some flowers. He puts a lot of work into that as well. But thank everyone for all of their thank you all for all of your support. If you haven't done so, please go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts on FN on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night, and like tomorrow night when we release our final mock draft live on the show. We'll be doing that with you guys, so make sure you tune in there. And if you can't catch us live or on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you listen to podcasts, we're on there as well. So be sure to subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. Patrick saying, calling it now, Mrs. Moore kicks the door open to get Andrew to drive her to the hospital when pick 13 is on the clock. Honestly, not very far-fetched, because Jackson Moore could be here any day now. So
we're on high alert, everybody.
We're on high alert just in case I have to sprint out of here and Drake has to take over the show by himself. But yeah, hey, I even joked around that we can still do the live stream from the hospital room. I mean, the super chats would be flowing in. I would expect everybody to give a super chat if I was live streaming live.
It's unethical if you don't. He's having a new baby
from the hospital room as my wife is giving birth, and I'm trying to pay attention to who the Colts are going to pick at number 15 in the NFL draft. So all the super chats better be coming if that happens. But appreciate all of your guys' support as always. Make sure to go order the Indy draft guide. Link is in the description. Join Drake and I on Thursday night as well. But before we do that, Drake, I know you've got some things cooking that are coming out on horseshoehuddle.com. Tell the people what they need to go check out.
Yeah, so I'm actually looking at my list of articles here. I've done a whole bunch of like coverage pieces, basically on multiple mock drafts around there, and how NFL.com believes the Colts should get a lockdown defender, big play receiver. But my favorite one is upcoming, and that is last year I didn't do one because I think that they saturate the crap out of people. So I'm not the biggest fan of them. But I did a mock draft. It's my only one, and it's going to be releasing tomorrow morning. So go check it out.
Yes, I've seen Drake's mock draft. It is ready for tomorrow morning, releasing around 8 a.m. Eastern. You're going to want to check that out. And if you haven't done so already, my final mock draft, 7 rounds, live on horseshoehuddle.com. Make sure to check that out. Definitely different than my past mock drafts. 3 trades. I think I ended up with 9 picks in total. Addressed a lot of needs. Got some high-powered athletes on all sides of the ball. Make sure you go check it out and let me know what you think of my final 2024 Colts mock draft on horseshoehuddle.com. But yeah, we're all releasing our mock drafts this week, so make sure you locked it into horseshoehuddle.com. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL. Like I said, we'll be back tomorrow night to reveal our final mock draft. Drake and I are going to go back and forth on the picks, and in order to determine that, Drake, heads or tails?
Oh, crap. It's a big decision. We'll do heads.
Okay. We're going to have Siri decide it for us. Siri, heads or tails? Okay, well, that was a fail because it went through and it said it's tails. So I thought I thought she was going to announce it, but it's tails.
Womp womp.
Yeah, exactly. So it's tails. So that means I get the odd picks tomorrow night. Drake gets the even picks. We'll be making trades. We'll tell you what the trade compensation is. So it's gonna be a fun night. Gonna be a fun episode tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back here to release our final mock draft. So Colts fans, draft week is here. It's going to be a fun week. We'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern as we reveal our final mock draft. Then after that, it's draft time on Thursday night. We'll be seeing you then.